parsha, which is Chayei Sarah, which is also Shabbos, the month we bless the Shabbos we bless the month of Kislev. So hold on, let's bring up the original document, the text. Okay. Hold on, here we go. I think this is it. Yes. Okay, so this is a Sicha from Shabbos Parshas Chayei Sarah, Mevarchim Kislev, that's like this week. So we're blessing the month of Kislev in the year Tafshin Chav, which is the end of 1959 going into 1960. Again, we changed the Jewish calendars on Tishrei, which is usually October, November, September, October, November, going into the new year, calendar year. So the Rebbe says like this, Ala Pasuk on the verse that opens this week's Parsha. Vayiyu Chayei Sarah, these were the days of Sarah, the life of Sarah. Shnei Chayei Sarah, and the Pasuk finishes off, this is the life of Sarah. So we start off saying this is the life of Sarah, and then we describe she lived 100 years, 20 years, 7 years, 127 years. These are the days of Sarah. Isa b'Medrash, the Medrash teaches us, V'huva b'Pirish Rashi, and Rashi mentions this as well. Shekulan shavin l'toiva, that all the days of Sarah were equally in the good. It means that it wasn't like she had some good days and bad days. Everything was a full day, like we say about Avraham Avinu, that the Baba Yamim. And the Rebbe explains, Zabagdama. Shekivan Shrashi maybe stiver medrash, b'pirusha alatay removing the very fact that Rashi quotes the medrash that he brings on his pirush on the Torah, on his commentary on the Torah. Moving is understood. The fact that the medrash says that all Sarah's days were equally good. So it's not a drasha, an idea that's kind of abstract. Even if you're just going to learn Chumash according to its literal translation, which Rashi, one of the rules of Rashi is that Rashi is coming to explain the pshutei shel mikra, the literal translation of the verse, that even if you're just learning the Torah literally, not with its kind of expanded space of medrash, it's still a message for you that all her days were equally good. Ukiyadu, as is known, a hefresh ben pirish Rashi ala Torah le pirish Rashbam. We know there's a difference between Rashi, how Rashi gives his commentary on the Torah, and I believe it's his grandson, the Rashbam. That if Rashi quotes a medrash, he's not going out of his comfort zone, where he typically explains everything only according to the simple explanation, even if he's going to quote a medrash, which is more kind of the abstract explanation of the verse, means that that's supposed to be understood literally as well, because it's quoted by Rashi on his commentary, versus his grandson. Maybe we wouldn't understand it that way. Varayidum, it's known. Divrei Rabbeinu Nisienu, the teachings of our Rebbes, means of the previous Chabad Rebbes. How important it is. It's part of the Chabad ideas is that we say every day the Chumash with the Rashi. How important and special it is and unique it is to be able to learn the Chumash with its Rashi translation and commentary. So if the Torah is going to tell us about Sarah's life, every single day of her life for the entire 127 years were all equally good. It's not a statement about just Sarah, for Sarah to live how she lived her life. But we know that everything that happened to our forefathers and foremothers and the mothers is a siman, is a sign of how we're supposed to live. Every single Jewish person is able to reach to this level, that your entire life, every day of your life, every year of your life should be equally good. But what does that mean? How do we translate that? So, what's it mean? How did it express itself? How do we see that every part of Sarah's life was permeated with goodness? We learn this more towards the end of the parsha. That what the Torah tells us about, Rashi teaches us about Rivka, that when Rivka came back into her mother-in-law's tent, all the things that were unique about Sarah came back. And what were the things unique about Sarah? So Rashi tells us, as long as Sarah was alive, her Shabbos candles lit every Friday night for an entire week. Not that she put in enough oil. It was a miracle. She put in oil for one night, like a regular person puts in oil for Friday night. And her candles lit. The story of Hanukkah was regular. It wasn't a miracle, so to say. It wasn't unique in Sarah and Avram's house, because Sarah's candles every Friday night lit for an entire week. Ubracha matzui be'isa. And there was a blessing in the dough, meaning in the bread. V'onen kosher ala oyel, and there was a cloud that stood over, kind of hovered over Sarah's tent. And when Sarah passed away, those three things stopped, meaning the candles that they lit on Friday night. Obviously, the Rebbe makes in a talk an argument that Avraham and Yitzchak lit candles according to the law. If there's no woman in the house, the man lights the candles. So Avraham or Yitzchak lit the candles, but their candles lit as long as the candles lit, whatever, 5, 3, 4 hours. Sarah's candles lit for 7 days. When Rivka came, these things came back, that the candles lit for 7 days. There was a blessing in the bread, meaning the bread had more blessing than would be the typical dough. And the third thing was that the cloud came and hovered over her tent. So now the Rebbe is going to explain what's the meaning of these three miracles that happened by Sarah and then returned with Rivka. So the Rebbe says, "Inin kosher." What's anin kosher ala oil? What does it mean that there was a cloud that was that was hovering over the tent? That kivan she'Avram v'Sarah lo yidarim b'makim kavua. Avram and Sarah didn't live in a specific place. We know one thing for sure, that Avram and Sarah were constantly moving before they came to Eretz Canaan, later to be Eretz Yisrael, even, and then after they came to Eretz Yisrael. They were here, they were Hebron, Beersheba, up there, Egypt. They're all over the place. So they were traveling people. So they didn't have a makom kavua, a set place. I mean, it wasn't like they lived every 5 minutes somewhere else. Rashi makes an argument that there was 26 years in Beersheba and 25 years in Hebron, but still they lived a long life in Eretz Canaan and they kind of moved around. They kind of moved from place to place. They never built a house, at least not constantly. They didn't constantly build houses. They had tents. They didn't have a house of wood and stone. They lived in tents. Why did they have a tent? It means that was a shelter. It was shelter from the sun and from the rain. But they didn't have all the amenities of a house. I mean, obviously, he built a hotel and he had other things. They weren't living like, in sleeping bags. If anyone who goes into the desert with the Bedouins, they could have very high upgraded tents, but still it's a tent. So besides having the tent that protected them from the sun, from the environment, the shelter from the sun and the rain, they had aside for that a second shelter, which was the cloud over the tent. Means although they had the regular protection of any tent, they had an extra protection of the cloud. First they built the tent. First they did their own efforts. The Rebbe is going to explain in how we learn from what Sarah did in our life. So she didn't just say, well, if the cloud is coming, I don't have to do anything. She did what she had to do. Avram and Sarah did what they had to do. They built the tent and they put their efforts in. That's how they're going to have protection. If it rains, they won't be protected. They need a tent. If it's too hot, they need protection from the sun. They have a tent. Well, after they did their own efforts, came an additional protection from above, meaning from heaven, from God, something that was beyond their efforts. That's one thing that we see. That first they put it in their efforts, and above their efforts, after they put in their efforts, they were gifted by God. A second protection was the protection of the cloud over the tent. What's bracha mitzuya beisa? What does it mean that they had a blessing in the dough? So it says like this: Kiven shegadla milas Avram Sarah b'chnasas archim, because we know that Avram and Sarah were superior in their mitzvah and the performance of the mitzvah of hosting guests. They were the super hosts of their time and of all times. And we see that in the previous parsha, that just having 3 people show up at his tent, Avram shachat gimel parim. He slaughtered 3 cows. He could have fed them goulash. He could have opened the fridge and taken out leftovers. He could have slaughtered 1 cow. For 3 people, he slaughtered 3 cows. So So each one should have mishaleshes ha'orchim min hamuvchar. So you could give each one of the of mishaleshes ha'orchim, each one of the three guests from the best. Because the tongue is the best part, and each one eats their own tongue, he slaughtered 3 cows, so each one of the 3 guests can have a perfect piece. Not that they have to share or make a mixed grill. And Sarah took the flours. Silas is kind of more of a thick flour, and she made cakes. How are you moving? So just like Avraham went and slaughtered 3 cows to give them each the best part of the cow, so too we have to assume that Sarah made the best of cakes. That each that is all limited. How great of a cake can you make? I mean, you walk out to some of the bakeries here in Yerushalayim, and it's incredible how beautiful their cakes are. But it's all within limitations. And then God blessed that there was a super extra spice, a godly spice in her dough that she made her cakes and her breads. That was even a taisefis b'rachas HaKadosh Baruch Hu. God blessed her efforts that the cakes came out even better. Imagine that. And this little extra is it overrides all the efforts that she did. So if she, they say, it was elevated to a level of perfection that's beyond human ability. So that's the second miracle that happened around Sarah and Avram. Sarah's baking was blessed and was elevated to a godly level, right? What did he say? This food tastes to heaven. It was literally that way. And her tent was protected after she put in her efforts. Her and her husband put in her efforts of setting up the tent, came a godly protection. And then comes Ner Darlik Me'erev Shabbos L'Erev Shabbos, that her candles lit from Friday night to Friday night. The Rebbe says, what does that mean? Haner she'adlika Sarah mitzad atzma, kechol she'tegadol ma'alasai, harzeh inyan shabahagbala. As great as Sarah was, and when she lit her candles had limitations. And then came a gift from above. I mean, to say again, you could go into certain places today, Marasa Machpelah, other places, they have candles lit for months. They have a huge jug of oil. She put in a regular amount. So if she put in a regular amount with all the uniqueness of Sarah blessing the candles, it was limited. Comes a blessing from above. That her candles lit 7 days. From Friday night till the next Friday night. What is the idea? What does it signify, the idea that it lit? Why couldn't it light until Friday? Why couldn't it light till Thursday afternoon? It was to show that it never ended. There was constant, light, which is not natural. A person could bring so much effort. The idea of bli gvul, limitless, that's a blessing from Hashem. Why was it consistent? Because it never stopped. As soon as the fire of last Friday night went out, immediately she lit the next fire. Or could have been it happened simultaneously. So there was never a moment it wasn't the Friday night candle. It was consistent light from the candles of Sarah, and that's miraculous. That's bli gvul, that's limitless. But what the Rebbe is getting at over here is that when we get a blessing from above, we don't just say, okay, God's doing it. You have to do all your efforts. The blessing is on top of the efforts. So then what she say? Why do I have to light candles? God's this miraculous candles. What's the point? Nevertheless, because it's important for us to put in our own efforts. We don't want a handout, a spiritual handout. Sarah could have said, if there's a miracle, why do I have to light candles? Let the candles keep on going. From last week. No, Sarah every Friday afternoon, or Avraham, however the custom was in their house, set up the candles, the oil or the wick or the candles, whatever she lit. And she lit the match and she lit it. And then the blessing came in and carried it for 7 days. So the Rebbe says, Klaus Inyam said, what did we learn from this? What's the general lesson from this story of Sarah? Notwithstanding how great Sarah was on her own, with her own efforts. Kemuvim Rimayim Razal, as it's brought down from the rabbis that teach us, Benegel HaAvis from our forefathers. Timon HaKadosh Baruch Hu ba'olam hazeh me'ein olam haba. The forefathers, meaning our fathers and our mothers, were able to taste in this world from the world to come. Something that's not regular. Most people don't have the taste of this in this world, the world to come. And the world to come happens, or when they pass away, they go to the Garden of Eden, then they have the taste of the world to come. Behind the kshem shel love is so just like when Mashiach comes. It says Vesruach Atum Avim in Arts. What's one of the things that the Rambam quotes that's going to happen when Mashiach comes is that the spirit of impurity is going to be eradicated, taken away from this world. There'll be no impurities. So too, the Avos lived like that. They lived in an environment that there wasn't tumah within them. There was no impurities. Kedisa Bishalmi is the Talmud Yishalmi, the Jerusalem Talmud teaches. Avraham Avinu asa Yetzahara Toiv. Avraham Avinu turned his evil inclination, which signifies the idea of tumah, of impurities, he made it into good. He transformed his Yetzahara. That I found his heart trustworthy to me. That Avram was even greater than David. David says about himself that my heart is void. I killed my evil inclination. Avram transformed him. He's no longer an enemy. He became a friend. Not because Avram compromised. The evil inclination was no longer evil. So too we find in the Babylonian Talmud. The tractate in Nedarim teaches, we learned this before, that Avraham Avinu mastered over 248 of his limbs, Ramach Evarim. They totally mastered every part of their body. There was no part of their body that was pulling towards something. Even their desires were all about Hashem. So much so that they were like a chariot. What's the definition of a chariot? A chariot has no direction. The chariot only goes where the rider rides the chariot. The chariot can move, can carry, but the rider decides where the chariot goes. So too Avram and Sarah were chariots to Hashem. Wherever God wanted from them, they did. That their entire being, their entire body, they were chariots only to God's will. They call you all their days. So the Rebbe says, she was herself a great woman. She was a chariot to God. Everything about her, she lived the life of the world to come in her present life. Nevertheless, the Torah tells us, above all this great achievements that she achieved on her own, she was blessed from above with supernatural things that happened to her. That what was the difference? That she reached her max within limitations. She was blessed with the limitless. Light never stopped. The bread kept on giving blessing. It was heavenly. The protection above the tent with the cloud was above their efforts. As we say before, so someone could say, this is Sarah and Avram's life. What's that have to do with me? We say, no. Whatever happened to the fathers is a sign, and the Rebbe always adds, not just a sign, but an empowerment to the descendants of Avram and Sarah, meaning the Jewish people. That this is an empowerment and a strength that every Jewish man and woman has as an inheritance from our forefathers and mothers. And when Yerusha Shem Lehefsek, one of the ideas of to inherit something has no end, it's forever. Every single generation, not just some generations or some people. Every generation, every person inherits the powers from our forefathers and mothers. There's one condition. As long as you toil in your avodah, in your service, according to you, up to your limitations. Person says, I did the best. I'm mamish putting all my koiches, all my strength. Like Sarah, she put up the tent. She made the bread. She lit the candles. But after that, God blesses that overwhelmingly elevates your efforts beyond your capabilities. A lot, like it says, the story of Shechinah ben Daisa. Right? Put a finger. You have to put effort in. And all of a sudden, you're going to see that your achievements don't make sense. How was I so successful? How are things so successful? It's because that's the blessing from Hashem, but you have to put in your efforts. Only if you toil, you're going to find. First, you have to toil up into your abilities. Then you're going to find like a mitzvah, something what's a mitzvah? Something that's lost. It doesn't make sense. You never expected it. Means your success is going to be beyond your expectations, but you have to put in your own efforts. It's not just above your expectations because you underestimated yourself. It's taka above your expectations because it's above the efforts. But that comes a gift from Hashem. Like it says, when a person is not even noticing, one of the things that comes when a person's not paying attention is something like a lost item. All of a sudden you found, wow, I didn't realize. Hey, look at this. There's a diamond on the floor. Because it comes out of your das, out of your space. Because it's a gift from above. So that's the Rebbe saying, the first lesson is the lesson that we get from in general. The general idea that Sarah had these three blessings teaches us that she put in all her efforts. And when a person is going to, as descendants of Avraham and Sarah, we also have that gift from Hashem. That when God assures us, and when you put in all your efforts, you're going to see that your success is way beyond. It's almost like a mitzvah, almost like a lost item that you never expected. You're going to reach way beyond your expectations or your capabilities. So that's the general lesson. Now the Rebbe is going to go into the particulars of each one of these miracles. Why did this idea that Sarah was blessed beyond her efforts? Why did it show itself in these specific three things of the cloud over the tent, the candles that lit from Friday night, and the blessing in the bread? So here the Rebbe is going to explain. It's known. There's two requirements that a person basically needs to move on in life. Pnimim, internal things, like foods, etc. Umakifim, and external things, house, clothing. And also it's not just in substance, but also in ideas. There are things that a person takes them bipnimius. You take them internally. Like food. There's certain things. You can't eat them, you can digest them. If they stand above you, if you can eat clothing, it doesn't do anything, right? I mean, it's going to hurt you. It's only like a levush, like a garment. Or a house. So in external, we have two levels. And this is brought down in Chassidus, what's called makiv hakorv and makiv harachoik. We have things that fit you, right? If you wear someone else's clothing that are too large or too small, that doesn't work. But a house doesn't have to exactly fit you. A house could house a person that's tall or a person who's short or larger and smaller. So that's called a makiv harachik. But both of them are considered an external. They're an external protection. Food you have to digest internally. Those two ideas that the needs of a person that you have to internalize and the external protection are represented in the dough that Sarah was blessed in her cakes, in her dough. And the idea of the cloud that protected from the outside space of the tent, which is a makiv, which is an encompassing space, the person's shelter. Isa, what is the bread? Shemimenu oisim lechem that you make bread. What's the dough that you make bread? It's not just talking about the dough specifically and the bread specifically. It's talking about all types of foods. He quotes a verse to support that lechem is not just an idea of bread, but it's all foods. Which means it's something that you take internally. Va'oyel, and a tent, is the b'chinas makiv, is encompassing. The Rebbe says, what does this mean in Avodah? What is the Avodah of Pnimius? What is the service of Hashem, that things like bread that you internalize? And what is what's called the encompassing space of Avodah? So the Rebbe says, if vinyanim b'avodah, the ideas in Avodah is, Avodah shall be tam v'das. When a person does their service of Hashem based on reason, tam v'das, things that make sense, up into things that are logical to you. Like it says, b'chol levavcha b'chol nafshcha, means you give your whole heart and your soul, but it's logical, makes sense. Hi b'chinas pnimis, that's internal. Internal means you're using the things within you to serve Hashem. So you have limitations in your body and in your mind and heart as well. And what does it mean to serve God beyond logic, beyond reason? That's b'chol me'edecha. That's the third part of the Shema, with all your might, which is makiv. That's encompassing. You can't internalize it. It doesn't make sense. You don't understand it. So it's if you understood it, then it's internal. So it's b'chinas makiv. That's external. It's outside of you, outside of your understanding. What is the avodah with all your might? It's out of your space. You're going out of your form. Shizahu shema'oid oisis adam. Beyond your ma'oid means adam. Adam is the definition of who you are. Going out of your limitations is ma'oid. But in another way, Adam is the limitations. If you turn around the letters, the letters Adam, which is Aleph, Daled, Mem, you could make Mem, Aleph, Daled, which is Ma'oid, very out of your space. Why do you have to turn around the letters? Because to get out of your space, you have to get out of your form of a person. You limit yourself, or you are limited up until a certain level of comprehension or comfort, right? It's not just understanding, so it's a comfort. Getting out of your psychological or intellectual or emotional comfort zone for God. That's encompassing. The two levels of avodah, but they're not, we don't just have one avodah where you have to be totally out of your box. You have to have both. Maximize within and maximize without. So what is the avodah of pnimi, internalizing something and reaching the encompassing space outside of your limitations? Outside of, so to say, what you've limited yourself to. Out of your comfort zone, it's all within the person. And here the point is that after you've worked in your effort in both levels, maximizing the internal, the tamid, the logical, elevating all the tools that you've been given to the highest level, and also getting out of your comfort zone, your own set rules and boundaries. Also, you have the choices to get out of that. You get out of something, you do something more than that. Push yourself. Getting out of your own limitations. You do it up until your own abilities. Then you get gifted from above. Taisvis bracha, a blessing, like the blessing of the bread and blessing of the cloud over the tent. The blessing of God, that's much more than what you've given of your own. You get to a level of limitless, both with the pnimis, both within the things that are internal. So to say, your mind gets charged, your heart gets charged, your energy gets charged. So these are all internal things. And then also the external things, the places how you got out of your space, out of your comfort zone. And that's the avodah that Sarah. That's why specifically, the one miracle was when in the bread, something that you internalize. And the second miracle was in her encompassing space, which is represented by the tent, which is more encompassing than the clothing, which is more closer to a person's body. So now we understand the miracles of the first two. What's the miracle of the candle? Obir Inin Hagimel, the third miracle. Ner Dolik Mer of Shabbos Erev Shabbos, that her Shabbos candle is lit for the entire week. So B'Ktsar Kalpanim Pnei Koitzer Zman. The Rebbe says the Rebbe is Farbrengen in a winter Farbrengen. So the Rebbe says he's going to be short because evidently there wasn't enough time to elaborate. At least that's the simple explanation. In Yoni Shel Ner, what is a candle? She'eni Poil Davar Chadash. A candle doesn't add anything. Candle doesn't create. Shekol hadvarim shenimtzaim b'achei b'shah. This is a brilliant idea the Rebbe says over here. Shekol hadvarim shenimtzaim b'achei b'shah shemadlikim b'yaner hoyi b'gam lifnei she'adliko yesaner. That when you have a light, not just a candle, a light, right? The light doesn't create anything in the room. Whatever was in the room or the house before was there also. You just didn't see it. The candle allows you to see what's there. So what's the candle? What's the idea of a light in a room? Shilifnei had lakas in there before you turned on the light, the candle, meaning to see. All you saw was darkness. And you couldn't see anything that's in the room because of its darkness. Because of the lack of light. When you turn on the lights, Nasa or becomes all lit up. Now you see everything that's in the room. Means the light doesn't add anything, it just shows you what's there. What does this mean in Avodah? The idea of a light. That the light doesn't add anything, but shows us what's there. Right? Kediv Gemara, the Talmud teaches us. It's brought down in the teachings of the Rebbe Rashab, which his birthday was this week. Kiner mitzvah, that the light is a mitzvah, the Torah, and the candle is the mitzvah, and the Torah is the light. That Tala HaKasev is a mitzvah b'ner, Torah bar, it's brought down that the verse teaches that the mitzvah is like a candle, and the Torah is like the light. Mashal Adam, what's the example? So he gives an example, a person, Shem Halach B'Ishin Laila, walking in the darkness of the night. Ba'afela, and it's afela is also kind of a thicker darkness. You're scared to walk, right? There could be potholes, There's thorns. You don't see where you're walking. You're going to hurt yourself. He doesn't know where he's going or she's going. Or all of a sudden you have a avuka is a torch. So it's brought down that you have yourself a torch until you have the morning, the sun rising. And what's the problem of the darkness? The problem of the darkness is that you could confuse things. What you think is good is really bad, and what you think is bad is really good. What you think is, because you don't see, what you think is sweet is really bitter, and what you think is bitter might be sweet. So therefore, what's this mean in Avodah? Besides having that God, a person has to do the max within their internal and external, and that's where she got the blessing of the bread. Sarah got the blessing of the bread and the cloud over the tent, which is Pnimi Makiv, the internal and the external, that you maximize, and then you get blessed that you get that your internal abilities and external abilities get elevated. We have to see what's going on. If you don't see what's going on, it's very hard to operate. That through the luminary of Torah, Zui Primis Torah. What is the luminary of Torah? The Chassidus, the inner teachings of Torah. That all of a sudden shine, and you see everything that's going on. You get a clarity. Like when a candle, which is Ner Shabbos Shalom Bayis. Why? What's the reason why halachically? The rabbis told us that we have to light Friday night candles. It brings family unity. You see your wife, your children. Your wife sees you. Everyone sees each other. You can see what's going on in the house. It brings family unity. When everyone's seeing each other, it creates an environment. There's no more fighting and separation. If everyone's sitting in the dark, you're in your own space. If not for the light, if not for getting this clarity of the light, so then you could have arguments, you can have separation. You may think, because you're in darkness, you may not know. Certain things belong to God in your life, certain things belong to you. You can do whatever you want, because you're your own person. And the Rebbe says it's not just shalom bayis between you and other people. Shalom bayis within yourself. What's shalom bayis? Shalom bayis means that when you see each other, everything you can't separate yourself. If a person comes home and it's pitch dark, you sit in your own corner. What could you do? You can't sit with someone else. But when the light is on, everyone's together. So too, when the light is on in your own life, everything is you. So you don't have things that are separate from God. You see how everything's interconnected. You can't have things that are for Hashem and things that are separate from Hashem, because the light shows how everything fits together. The Rebbe says, to put it in simple words, a person may think that you could study Torah and fulfill the mitzvahs exactly as you should your entire life. But if you don't have light in your life, not just light, but also vitality and passion. You can have it without light and without passion. You must be lit up both with the warmth of the light and the visual of the light, clarity. That you have light and vitality in your avodah. And how you need, what's the light in a person's life? That's the luminary of Torah, which is Chassidus. If you're not going to learn Chassidus, you're not going to learn the inner secrets of Torah. Everything's going to be separate. You're going to open up a piece of Gemara, you're going to close the Gemara, you move on. The Chassidus brings light in everything of your existence. But it's not enough to have it running for one day. It has to be consistent every week, in and out. Constantly, the light of Torah Chassidus is lit up in your house, in your being. It has to be consistently. No matter what situation you're in, you're constantly adding light. It's not just about the efforts of before Shabbos, but it also affects how you eat on Shabbos. And the Rebbe answers, that the Rebbe finishes off, that the cause and all this, has to be that you're all equally good. V'chol hashanim, v'chol hazmanim, in the years and all times of your life. Hen gasher toiv b'gashmis, whether you are in a good financial situation or in a good health situation. It's easier for you to serve Hashem. You're feeling good. You have the means financially to serve Hashem. Sometimes you have worse years, challenging years. Parnas is not going so well for you. Livelihood is not going so well. Maybe you're not as healthy as you would like or should be. But that's what Sarah had. Sarah had, no matter what her scenario or no matter what her circumstances were, whether she was in Egypt by Paro for 15 minutes, or she was in by Elimelech, or whether she was with Avraham, she was in this house, this place, that place. Everything was equally good. She maximized everything in any scenario. Not just in one of the three things. She maximized her pnimius, her makiv, and she had a light lit constantly. Internally, she maximized herself. Externally, she maximized herself. And she had the clarity of the light of Torah constantly in her life, in every situation. There was a blessing in the bread. Anin kosher ala oil. She always had, in every situation in her life, she had the power of the external, the cloud. When and the candle was lit constantly. She had a light, she had the luminary lit up in her life in every situation from Friday to Friday. And how does one have that true luminary? It's through the inner secrets of Torah as explained in the teachings of Chassidus. As the Rebbe Rashab, so to say, the birthday boy, writes in his famous letter with regard to the 19th of Kislev, that's coming up this next month, Torah Baal Shem Tov, that the teachings of the Alter Rebbe and the teachings of Chassidus, this is the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov. It's not something added, it's not something different. This is the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov. And by spreading the well springs of the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, which are the teachings of Chassidus, this is going to help bring the Mashiach, Tzava'as HaRivash, speedily in our time. We have a few minutes, let's continue. This is the first talk the Rebbe said on a short Farbrengen and on a winter afternoon. B'Sefer Tzava'as HaRivash, we know that we have a book called the Tzavah, which is the testimony, so to say, of the Baal Shem Tov. Rivash is a Rashi Tevis of Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov. After the first part, that the Rebbe spoke about in the previous Farbrengen of that year, 1959. So the second part of the Tzava'as HaRivash is like this. It says, Shivisi Hashem lenegdi tamid. This is put up in many shows. Shivisi Hashem lenegdi tamid. God is constantly in front of me. Shivisi lashon also Hishtavus. The word Shivisi means equal, from the word Shaveh, everything's equal. Hishtavus means I'm consistent. I don't have ups and downs. Shavis also means I don't get excited or less excited or more excited. It's all equal. In every situation in your life, not just in good times or not just in bad times, right? People turn to God in bad times. In all situations in your life, I'm always equal. This is a big avodah. The Rebbe talks about the avodah of Shavius in Askil Chabina, that a person has to be, doesn't get more excited when good things happen to them, doesn't get less excited when bad things happen to them. Everything's equal in the way of serving Hashem. So b'chol davar u'mu'ura, anything that happens, hakol shavetz, everything's equal to this person. Whether you have things in your life that people find praiseworthy, or people may shame you about. No matter what's going on in your life, it means not just things that are happening to you, but also your qualities. There's certain things about you that people say that, oh wow, you're such a great person. There's certain things about you that people say, how dare you? No matter what you're eating, whether you're eating the most delicate, fancy foods, or if you're eating something just simple. You're not excited, less excited, or more excited. Everything has to be equal. The idea of shavius. This is the teaching of the Baal Shem Tov in the second teaching of the Tzavah. Tzavah is like also, what's the English word for it? The Tzavah is the will, so to say, the will of the Baal Shem Tov. The Alter Rebbe writes, it wasn't written by the Baal Shem Tov, but these are kind of ideas that the Baal Shem Tov gave over in his teachings that kind of passed on and were written in a book called the Will of the Baal Shem Tov. She's bar Be'ez Hashem Misvadim Abayis. The Rebbe says the other parts in the will of the Baal Shem Tov that will be explained in other gatherings. I guess the Rebbe that year, 1959, maybe they published the Tzava'as HaRivash. So the Rebbe was going to explain different parts of the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov. Messiahim v'zeh madriga g'dayel moed. The Alter Rebbe says to have shavius, to equalize everything in your life. Never in every situation means the equal is in every scenario, in things that you're taking, things that are happening, how people view you. You don't get excited from praise, and you don't get turned off or overwhelmed from criticism. No matter what's going on in your life, you have shavis. You're always equal. You have a kind of sense of presence, and that Baal Shem Tov says it's a big level to reach that. The Rebbe says, this is a big avodah. We talk about this a lot, the idea of shavius to have, we're not going to get through the whole piece, the idea of having consistency and balance. The Rebbe says, Hishtavus davar. Move on, Shemefarish Apshat Pasuk Shivisi Hashem tamid. That means, although he doesn't bring proof that a person has to have equality, so to say, shavius, balance like this, there's no proof for it. So he means that's how he understands the word Shivisi, from the word Shava. Lenegdi. If a person has God in front of them, so everything's going to be equal. If you're able to be aware of God's presence with you constantly, then your life is balanced. Now says like calling on Shabbos, and everything's going to be equal. The good things that happen to you, the bad things, you don't get overexcited or overwhelmed. You don't feel better or feel worse. You don't taste better. You're not excited. Everything's balanced. Why? Because God is in front of you. And the Rebbe asked a question. The Rebbe, why is the Baal Shem Tov add that there's other things that you have to have this equality in? The Rebbe says it doesn't make sense. If he gives us details, so the details alone should be enough. Why does he have to add so too in other things? Or all other things. If he already says in all things, why does he have to give details? Okay, we don't have in front of us the Tzava'as HaRivash to have exactly what the Rebbe is talking about. Let's try to get the idea what the Rebbe is saying. Even if he wants to say, like in our Talmud class, that he gives some details of where a person should find equality. Like, for instance, he says, if a person praises you or shames you, a person, if you have good foods or bad foods, and then he gives a general statement, so too in everything. It seems like it's mished up. First he said, either you put the rule first or the rule at the end. The Baal Shem Tov quotes some examples in details. Then he says it's so too it should be in all your things. Then he adds some details. Gimel, he says a third question. Why is the Baal Shem Tov say that to be shavius, to find equal balance, consistency is a high level? Why is that considered a high level? We quote it right away in the beginning of the quote of the Jewish law. That we tell a person, as soon as you wake up, even before you wash your hands of the negel of the netilas yadayim, even before you say the moedani. Of course, you're not even holding any levels yet. Let me say right away, Shivisi Hashem, lenegdi tamid. You have to have consistency. So how can you say it's a madrega? Madrega means it's something that's special to reach that level, that everything's balanced by you. There's different levels of Shivisi. There's Shivisi, the balance, the way it is explained by the Baal Shem Tov, in a much more elevated level. And then there's the simplicity of it. Again, we're in the middle of, so to say, a series of gatherings that the Rebbe was talking about something about that year of the Baal Shem Tov. And it could be because it was also a special year of the Baal Shem Tov's life. So the Rebbe says, the Rebbe says again that how do we understand the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov is from the teachings of the Chassidus of Chabad specifically, because the Chabad Chassidus is the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov. Okay, let's see, we have 1 minute here. Let's just do one little paragraph here. Mivor b'kama is explained in many places. What's the main point of a person's being here in this world? Is to refine your midos, your characters, your character traits, meaning in chesed, gvur, and tferes, in your kindness, in your balance, in your boundaries, in your gvura, and in your tferes, and in your inner beauty. But how could you properly refine and work on your character, your emotional character? You have to start with having intellectual strength. It means if a person doesn't have understanding, you have to use your mind to know how to work on your heart. It's not enough to just internally fix, so to say, refine your character, but it has to come out in action, which are the next three of the midos, and that's decide how you actualize things. But in order, the main thing is to transform your inner core. And you have to work and use your mind to work on that, and it has to penetrate to your actions. That's the main person, is to change your core character. That is the person, the core character. That the person's avodah, the person's characteristic identity comes from your emotional core. Okay, again, this looks like a beautiful continued talk, but we have to go. So whoever has time on their own to continue this talk of the Baal Shem Tov, on the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, but just to learn a small idea of the Baal Shem Tov is already a huge schus for us on Erev Shabbos. I want to wish everyone a good Shabbos, a good Chodesh, and thank you for joining. Hope to see those who come and join this Saturday night, Motzei Shabbos, same time, 11 o'clock in New York time, 8 o'clock Pacific time. We're going to be learning a short class on halacha of davening, hilchos tefillah, with, of course, starting off with a story of tzaddikim of the Baal Shem Tov for Motzei Shabbos.